All right, please welcome writer, director, star of The Dirties, Mr. Matt Johnson.
Hey, thanks for coming. I feel like I want to finish that conversation we were just
We were talking about Canadian film finance.
Yeah.
It's very exciting and sexy.
Todd and I are both from Toronto. And actually, he was one of the first people to ever see this movie almost a year ago, I think.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, almost a year ago.
Presuming that there's nobody here that was at the other screening, I'm going to be boring and ask you the same question that we led off with last time.
Yeah, sure.
It's interesting. You made a movie about high school shootings, and you actually managed to convince people to let you do this in functioning, working high schools with real high school students. How the hell did you do that?
Yeah. I mean, I talk about this a lot, and I think that the mindset, especially amongst young filmmakers, are there any filmmakers in here? Probably a lot, right? Or people who went to film school. And I mean, I'm still in film school, in grad school, but when I was in my undergrad, like, you would always be told that you couldn't do things like that. Like, you couldn't shoot in real environments, or you couldn't shoot with real people, or you couldn't shoot in schools. And what we found is that if we just asked enough schools and came at them honestly and were like, we're film students, we want to do this project, we want to show bullying in a real way. Like, after asking 3 or 4 principals, the 4th and then the 5th and then the 6th, all were like, yeah, okay, sure. And so we were able to just go in as real students. Nobody knew who we were other than a couple teachers. And everybody, although it was maybe confusing for people who were seeing us for the first time, everybody just assumed we were students. It was all good. It was in small town Ontario for the most part, which is where Toronto is.
And can you tell us a little bit about your process of making this and kind of the balance between scripted material and improv, and who in the movie were actors versus kind of non-professionals who knew what they were into versus people who were just happened to be there while the camera was there?
You know what, I think it's actually probably pretty obvious when you're watching it. Like, when something's happening when nobody's in control and nobody knows what's going on, I think that's clear. Like that scene at the beginning with the kids, those kids had no clue that they were being filmed or what the hell was going on. And that, you know what's funny, that movie that they're making, if you guys remember The Visitor, is actually on our DVD. Like, they finished that movie. I got to see it, I think a week and a half ago, because we had to find them. Our producer had to go find them so we could get releases from them so we could release the movie. Because, I mean, to put it in perspective, we would shoot random shit outside with random people all the time. And I had no idea what was going to be in the movie and what wasn't until months later. So when we were like, oh, we'll open the movie with this scene of these kids, we had no idea what their names were. Like, we didn't even really remember where we shot that. And so we had to take stills from the film, and our producer, Matt Miller, had to go to every middle school in a certain area and show principals these photos and be like, do you know who these kids are? I know this is weird. We made a school shooting movie, and we need to put them in it.
We're really honestly not pedophiles.
Yeah, exactly. And eventually we found them, and the one dude, the main guy's parents were so keyed up that we'd done this, that they were like, his name's Patty, they were like, Patty, you've got to finish that movie, and we'll put it on the DVD. And so I got to see the movie, and it's ridiculous. It's not crazy and like nuts. It's like a 35-minute drama. It sounds incredibly wild. Like, people are dying, and there's a forest and monsters. Like, that's not it. It could play it could play Fantastic Fest in the shorts department. Did I answer that question? Oh, about real actors. There were no real actors. Owen, my friend in the movie, is not an actor. He's a high school English teacher, and he was just a guy that I'd met because his friends were the producers. I didn't know him before we started shooting this. And then the bullies, the ones that I killed, clearly they knew what was up. Like, they knew that was going to happen. But on the whole, people in schools had no clue, except for in scenes where, like, we're clearly manipulating a lot of stuff, and then we used students from the actual school, but we told them we're going to shoot this as really like this. But I think it's obvious. When you watch it, I'm sure you guys can even tell, like, what was real versus what wasn't. That kid who comes up to us when me and Owen are fighting, and he just looks at us. Walks away, like, clearly that was real. And what's so funny about that scene is that scene goes on for like another minute and a half. We get it all, this like really pulpy, pretentious stuff about like, oh, you betrayed me and all this stuff. And when we watched it, we were like, oh, no, it's so good to just end on that guy fucking up the scene. And that happened a lot because we couldn't do second takes ever, right? It's a little bit like that Disney movie, that Escape from Tomorrow, where they were just in an environment and they couldn't really do things again because it would look so weird. Did you guys see that movie? Yeah, so a lot of it you can tell that they're just sort of doing it for the first or the second time. I think the director said they never did more than 3 takes or something. With us, it was like even worse. Like it wasn't even, we couldn't even think of doing something twice. Because then everybody would be like, what the hell are you doing? You could only walk by realistically talking about a girl liking you really loud. Like once. Like, as soon as you do it again, like we just lose the reality of all people around us.
Do you have questions from the audience? Yeah, right there.
I wondered about, as you're writing it, sort of the conceit of the cameraman.
I get asked about that a lot, and in fact I can talk about this in some detail, because I'm sure a lot of people think this. And it was sort of a strange compromise that we had to make. Because I think what a lot of people are wondering is who's shooting this, and who's controlling it, and why don't we see them, or why do we see them as much as we do? Because I reference them a lot, like I talk to Jared, one of the camera guys, and I give them popcorn, and like they're very much involved in a lot of ways in the process. And in the original version of the film, I think not the one that you saw, because I changed it by the time that you got it, had those guys as characters, and they were 2 kind of nerdy grade 9 kids in a media class that Matt had convinced to just follow them around to help them shoot this project. And they had faces and names, and we showed them, and we kind of integrated their story with what Matt and Owen were doing. And it was like a full 20 minutes at the head of the movie. Like the movie was originally about 100 minutes long. And when we would watch that version of the film, something was so wrong with it. And it was because you knew who the perspective of this film was coming from directly. It made it so difficult to psychologically get involved and to feel, I guess, not guilt, but you know that feeling at the end where you kind of feel like your buddy is with us?
Complicity.
Yeah, that complicity that you feel, it totally removed that. And so what I did was I went in on it, just removed almost every single direct reference to who they were, and I took out all their lines and I don't show their faces, in an attempt to try to make the audience closer to that perspective, so that you feel like you're just there with us because you've never seen who this person is. And granted, it raises a lot of questions, but I don't think those are unresolvable questions. I think that in the end, those questions are actually kind of good. I think filmmakers specifically are like, oh, they want to know who that is, but I don't think not knowing is fucking up too bad. But I had to pick the lesser of two evils in that, because I think the effect is cooler than like explaining it, if that makes any sense. Or not. I guess everybody thinks that's... You wanted to know they were kids? Trust me, it sucked the other way. It reeked of like wanting to over-explain everything. And if you just watch the film with the conception that Matt is making this movie, like you see Matt editing it, you see Matt talking about it, you see Matt talking about putting credits into it, like it's clear that he's collecting all the material and making it as you go. And in fact, in some of the scenes, if you guys work with Final Cut at all, in the timeline, you can see the scene that's about to happen in the timeline, like literally, because I was editing it in that room while we were shooting, so there were scenes that I would be like, oh, let's go watch that scene and talk about it and make a scene out of that. And then you see the timeline keep going with other things. Same with the writing. We didn't write a script, we wrote everything on cue cards, and those cue cards are on the wall in the room where we're shooting it, so you can see how the movie ends, like read for read, if you freeze frame some of the film. Yeah, over there.
How was the blueprint? Was that a real scene? I mean,
yeah, people ask about that like less than I would expect. I always expect people to ask about the guns and those blueprints, and only once has somebody asked me if that was real. And yeah, in Toronto, it's very easy to get blueprints of like public buildings. Super easy. I used to make a web show called Nirvana the Band, the show, where it was like these 2 guys just trying to get it's exactly like this except a movie. And we would go into the public and go to like government buildings and ask for shit, and they always give it to you. If you look young and you say you're a student, nobody wants to say no to a happy student. I think when I'm asking people things, I always seem so stupid. Like I try to act like I'm so stupid that for them to say no would be like saying no to some like a kid who's sick. Yeah, they gave them was, we had to do a ton of VFX. That was you would never think. The blueprints wound up being for, like for the school had all these company logos on them that were the only things we couldn't clear. And so we had to have a VFX guy go in and take out all the logos from those blueprints, which you'd never notice, but it took like a month. Yes?
On the GoPro footage when the kids are like screaming and running out of the school, how did you do that to make all the kids run out of the exit?
Well, those kids knew that we were shooting what we were shooting, but like we only did one take of that because we didn't have any money. So we could only shoot it once. If you watch, it's actually just one take that I cut up with the GoPros because we couldn't afford to do that gun effect more than once. It sucks. But they'd never like heard a gun before. Like they were all horrified. Everybody was horrified when that was actually happening because they knew what the thing was. Those were all kids that actually go to that school, and you know, I think it really was a moment for them. I mean, yeah, that wasn't a complicated thing to do. We just told everybody, come here this day, we're shooting something, and then when they were there, we told them that these guys were going to get killed, we're going to ice them. Yes?
It's not been ambiguous on purpose, but is there an idea of what happens in that right after? Yeah.
Our purpose with ending the movie, that line is the only line that we ever wrote, where I say, oh, and it's me. The reason we end it right there is because our whole intention with making this movie is that everybody, like school shooting stories or whatever, are so cliched and almost archetypal at this point because of the way the media portrays them. Like, we know. When this movie ends, like, you could tell me exactly what happens. Everybody could. Like the news machine, like, turns this person into, like, a complete monster, and you hear about this, you know, psychotic kid who does this thing, and, you know, that's all we would know after this happens. So what I wanted to do was show absolutely everything that happens before that new story starts, and I think that was it. Like, I think some people wonder if Matt kills Owen, but I think that's crazy. Like, he's basically in love with him. Like, there's no way he would. He's so handsome, he'd never kill him. It's clear that Matt's relationship to Owen at that point is like, we're still friends, right? Like, there's no, that's just, it's changed a lot.
That's something we have back there.
Yeah, you were talking about people in the movie. The mother and father, whenever he comes up and talks to them about, you think I'm crazy. How much did they know about the movie, and how much was just being a parent? Because you were speaking about the news machine that's going to bring out the parents, and you know it's going to be, he was a quiet kid that kept to himself and didn't play music
everybody
around.
liked, yeah.
How much did they know whenever they were doing that speech?
Well, I'll tell you something very interesting. That's my real mother, who also had no idea we were filming her. I had no clue what was going on, and as a kid, I would just say such insane shit to my mom all the time, that was just like another day. And I knew that would happen. Like, it was not my intention originally to put my parents in it, because I thought, this is Matt's movie, and he would think parents are lame. And like, there was a scene early on that we cut where he sort of talks about school shooting movies, and like how they always try to portray them as homosexuals and coming from deranged homes and alcoholics, and he was intentionally trying to keep the perspective away from those things, if that makes any sense. He was trying to make the film not about that stuff, but then I just thought it was too funny to put my mom in it, because my mom is a doctor in Toronto. She's the director of mental health at the University of Toronto, and so when I was a kid, she would talk to me about this stuff all the time. And in fact, when Columbine happened, she was like, oh, those poor boys. She was very sympathetic to Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold in a way that I don't think I really understood. But she's super, super tolerant and sympathetic to people who do violent things, because, and I think that's one of the main reasons that I think subconsciously I wanted to make this film. Because I think villainizing and dehumanizing people who do bad things does not get us as a culture anywhere. It's actually quite medieval, in my opinion. I know this is controversial, but like by sort of making certain people devils and certain people good, like there's no psychological progress of us as a society that way. And I knew that me saying these things about me being crazy to my own mother, she wouldn't just be like, shut up, or she wouldn't just shoo me away. She like started a conversation with me about what it means to be crazy. And as it was happening, if you ever watch this movie again, watch my face when she starts saying like the really good shit. I just lose it. I'm just like, oh my god, this is so good. I can't believe she's saying this. I started to laugh. We had to kill my mic, and I turned away from the camera. And we cut shortly after because I'm like, oh, this is too good. And that's how you know I'm not an actor and I suck at this, because whenever in the real world you see something good happening, like that old man who's like, do you need help? Are you okay? I'm like, oh, this is so good. And it happens time and again. Sometimes even when Owen does something good, because he's not an actor and he can't really act, we would just get lucky over and over again. Even when he will do a good line read, or he'll say something interesting and new, I'll start to laugh because I'm so happy that we got this thing. So, yeah. Yes?
Because so much of it was one take, you said it just happened, was the bicycle running into the
Yes.
car.
Yeah, I did run into that car, and it's so shitty that the guy filming me didn't get it, because so many people think we staged it, because it happens off camera. Well, why would we write that? It's so stupid. Right, and then Matt bumps into a bicycle at this moment where they're planning a school shooting. Won't it be hysterical? Like, there's no way we would come up with that. It's so stupid. But then when it happened, like, and my reaction is like, I'm trying to calm everybody down. I'm like, I'm okay, keep shooting, keep shooting. But that happened for real. But I didn't get hurt because like the brake was covering my fingers. You know what I mean? It was a shitty bike with a long brake, and so I didn't get hurt, and I just fell over. But I fucked up the car. Like, I hit it hard. Yeah.
Before the movie, you refused to do the intro. Have you noticed that when you intro this movie,
It fucks it up.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's not that did you say I refused to do the intro?
No, I said
It's okay. I mean, I do. It's valid. I really do. And I think the reason that
he's
I
a
do
diva.
that, I mean, clearly I like talking about the film, so I wouldn't mind. But I think, and you guys would probably agree, like if I came up here at the beginning of this as a cogent, young adult who's like, oh, it's like this, we made it like this. When you watch the movie, there's such a disconnection between that and like sort of the nut that I play, that it's way better afterwards to see this stuff. But it has nothing to do with me being like, oh, I can't be up there, I'm gonna sleep. And this movie screened at a ton of festivals, and I've never introduced the film. Normally the other people that made the film come up and introduce it. And I think it just works way better. And also it's kind of interesting. We screened this movie in Sarasota. If you guys have ever been there, it's all old people. It's a totally geriatric community. And have you been to Sarasota Film Festival?
No, never.
So, and I'm not kidding, when I tell people this, they're like, oh, that's bullshit. Like, 9 to 10% of the audience thought, for real, it was a documentary. And when I went up at the end to do the Q&A, people were like more confused than like old ladies and old men, like in the backs of their chairs like this, like, what happened? What happened? Like they were in a dream or something. It was like, oh, a cutting edge documentary, incredible access to school shooters. And they're just so old, right? That's not enough at old people, but it was interesting. So anyway, that's why I don't do it. You had a question right behind.
What do you want people to take away from this movie?
Well, I think normally that's a tough question, I think, for filmmakers, but it was super clear to us. Like, when I was a kid, Columbine was like a very confusing thing. Like, I was quite young, and then after that, it sort of became a part of youth culture. And me and my friends would make jokes about that kind of stuff all the time in a way that I think was extremely tasteless and offensive to people older than me. But to us, it was like if you grew up in a war or something like that. Like you don't. It just is sort of part of. I mean, I'm speaking for myself, my friends. It's just sort of a part of all our culture. And as I got older, I started really thinking about, like, I think as I got into it with my mom, I started thinking about sort of the nature of what makes somebody a good or a bad person, and the way that we portray those things. Then I watched all the documentaries about Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold, along with one of the other co-writers, Josh. And we saw the home videos that they made were like exactly the same as the kind of stuff that I did with my friends when I was a kid. And I just started feeling like if you make really terrible decisions and terrible mistakes in your life, you really kind of get written out of the book of history in, I think, kind of a cruel way. And I think I have a problem with that. I think that, as I said before, we don't really move toward towards solving this problem of violence and mental illness if we just right away write those people out. And so I wanted to at once make a film about what my high school experience was like and address this issue of how we portray violent young people in a credible way that I could feel proud of. So I mean, I wanted to have people talking about this issue in a way that they weren't before, and I wanted to make a movie that I could watch in 10 years and be like, oh yeah, I was like that. So selfishly, that's sort of the reason that I did it. It's just what people take out of it. I mean, I think it's so clear. I mean, a lot of people will say, oh, this is an indictment of gun violence or gun control, or this is clearly about, it's a thesis film saying that if you watch too many movies, you go crazy and kill people. But I think clearly, if you have those ideas about what makes people violent, then you're crazy. Like, we don't live in a society full of Manchurian candidates. And all of a sudden they're like, yes, exactly, bang, 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 bang. Like that, the things that people confuse this film to mean are intentional because it starts people talking about that. I'm sure that people who see this movie already have been like, so clearly that saying that media makes school shooters. And then somebody else who saw the film, I think, would disagree with them. And that conversation is sort of pretentiously what we want to talk about.
All right, we got time for just one or two more. I'd like to get somebody, sorry, I'm kind of ignoring the back because I'm blinded by this light. Somebody in the back section. You got a good one to close it up. Right in the corner, yep.
I was just wondering what the story was with the guy who was randomly insulting you guys as you walked away from the building.
that dude, yeah, that guy came and auditioned to play Owen. And he's actually a pretty cool guy who went to camp with one of the producers of the film. And he was so nervous. He's like one of the most nervous guys that we'd ever met. We're like, oh, we should have him as a bully too, to show that these guys get bullied by literally every in school. Like even this guy who's like super awkward and nervous feels like he's above these guys. And what we did was we had him outside of the school. That was shot like outside of the real school where everybody around was real. And we would just sort of walk past him and then walk past him and walk past him. And every single time he would just say some insane thing. Just would go and go and go. We did about 15 of them and we just like all the best ones in the film. Anyway, thank you everybody for coming. If you have any more questions, I'll send you So I think it comes out October 4th, so you can see it or help you see it.
Yeah, this is a movie that's going to live and die on word of mouth. If you like the movie, be vocal about it. You know, kind of.
Actually, this mic has been dead for a while, hasn't it? Everyone tell me. Thanks again.